Good afternoon. So I haven't managed to stream all week due to life drama, which I will talk about a little bit in a moment. But now I only have about half an hour to 40 minutes, so I'm going to try and do something really quick, just because I know obviously everybody's excited about what the market's doing. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to trade myself at all this week, and really even do much analysis. I've done little bits, charts in the channel, in the free channel, and in the private group. But haven't given much other than that. I was feeling a bit of FOMO, because obviously everything's running and I'm missing out. But actually, then I kind of reflected and thought I actually hate trending environments anyway. Like I much prefer trading ranges. So it's when demand's being broken or supply is being broken. Obviously, that doesn't work for my style. So it's great if you're an investor, but I think it's less good if you're a trader, unless you have a very low time frame strategy. And yeah, you can jump in using moving averages or like low time frame supply and demand. Which really means you need to be monitoring very quickly. Whereas for me, I much prefer, and you can see like from my charts, that when things come back to major zones, then to look for the bigger reversals and just get in at the start of a trend rather than like having to jump in FOMOing, with potentially high risk or potentially lower reward later. So yeah, anyway, the problems I've had this week is that I got hacked on Saturday. Um, Two Solana wallets, or two accounts in one wallet, I guess. And yeah, it's very frustrating because I don't know how. I have no idea if like my seed phrase was compromised in some way. I was an idiot and did have it saved on the cloud, which obviously isn't there anymore, but a bit late now. But also I can't see any way that that's been accessed, nor can I see any way that my computer's been accessed, having done countless virus scans and looking at the event logs and all that sort of stuff. So frustration is really not knowing how it's happened and not knowing if everything I have then is compromised. So pretty much everything else has private keys, like not private keys, Google Authenticator. So it'll be hard to get into anything else. Um, unless somebody accesses my phone. But anyway, to the hacker, if you're here, thanks for that. Much appreciated. You really wrecked my week, which I'm sure was your intent, and you did it for really not very much money. And yeah, it's kind of frustrating when you think you do quite a lot of stuff to help other people and then somebody screws you over, but I guess that's life. Excuse me, just back from the gym. So I need to have my protein. So anyway, I have also on top of that, I had already organized a new computer because obviously my issues I've had with my streaming. And I can see my camera's a bit of a mess on this computer, so I don't know what's going on with that. So I'm gonna have to work through some issues, but obviously I had to reset up the whole computer, and that's taken the better part of the week because obviously nothing's ever easy in my life. Yeah, anyway, that's enough about me. But that's kind of why. So anyway, just as a reminder to everybody, secure your stuff. Like change if you use Solana wallets or things that are online, then change your wallets regularly. Just transfer to somewhere else, different seed phrase. So at least if somebody does compromise it at night, because I don't know again, like the timing, was it compromised on the day? I don't see any reason for it to have been. I've got a feeling if it was compromised, if there's a couple of instances that I think might have happened. Like for example, when I was in Thailand, I was using an open internet network. And then also there was some weirdness at one of the sites I was connected to, and that was a couple of weeks before. So Thailand was back in April, and the weirdness was a couple of weeks before. So it's possible the person had my keys and was sitting on it for a couple of weeks before actually doing anything about it. So yeah, anyway, just as a reminder, be careful, and don't compromise yourself. God, I have to turn the spotlight down on this. Like I thought it was dark, so I put the spotlight up to the top. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, back to the charts. Bitcoin. So obviously I've been doing updates in the channel. I was looking at this. I've kind of deleted a lot of stuff off my chart now. At least it's nice when things break out that you can actually clean up your charts, or at least I can, because mine are obviously a complete mess. So I had this kind of 113 to 127 box as a possible rejection area, and I say possible because obviously there's no reason for it to reject here. There's no supply. There's nothing. This is just based on sort of some history. So there was a similar, like the Bitcoin likes to do the 1113 to 127 rejection. This I think was actually slightly less than 113, but this top in 2021. And then some of the bottoms you can see the same. Plus you see the same low time frame. So it's always something to keep a watch out for. Yes, you can even see this box here. I think I had that was an extension of that drop that we had off the 100k mark back then. But also I was looking for, the main thing I was looking for, if you follow me, you'll know, was a confluence with Korea taking out all-time high. So again, this was a similar thing happened in 2021. Obviously, there's no reason it should to do the same thing, but I just wanted to watch out for it in case it did. So back again in 2021, Korea, with the first hit on October, hadn't taken out the high, whereas the US dollar pair had. And then the second hit, it came back and took out the high. And this again is slightly different because obviously the hit here is significantly lower. And I think Bitcoin hadn't taken out the high at that point. Or sorry, the US dollar pair hadn't taken out the high. Or maybe it had, can't remember. Probably check that actually. Back in May, had we taken out the high then? Yes, we had in fact. So yeah, so back in May, the US dollar pair took out the high. The Korea pair was significantly lower still at that stage, as was the euro pair, the yen, and all those pairs. Now they've all come back and taken out the high. I think the only one that hadn't last I looked was the euro pair, but normally I just watch Korea. But I was just kind of interested to see again just what the reaction was here. And then low time frame, the other thing I sort of commented in the channel, and we're still obviously faffing around in this area and still holding local demand. So there's no reason to sell this as yet, other than the fact it's consolidating. But just for a low time frame entry, again, what I was looking for was the chance of the US dollar pair taking out this small 8-hour supply in here, whilst the Korea pair held the 8-hour supply, because again, Korea is less likely to stop hunt than the US dollar pair. So I had set an alert for this hourly supply up here. It didn't quite hit that on the wick, so if it does come back there, you can watch out for that. In the meantime, however, it has created a 2-day demand. So on both the Korea pair and the US dollar pair. On the CME pair, it hasn't. But yeah, that's just to be aware of. So again, the trend is still up. We're still holding the green box is essentially the range, the low of the range. We're still holding that on this an hourly on the US dollar pair, and it's an 8-hour on the Korea pair. But yeah, you're watching for that to start showing signs of weakness if you're really going to get a bigger short. There's heaps of CME gaps below, and I have done very little on in the way of trying to figure out like where we might bounce if we do come down. Because the thing is, again, if we do come down from here, Bitcoin has a tendency to either keeps going, or if it comes down, it's going to drop hard. So again, let's go back to this, what happened in 2021. So my phone is buzzing heaps. But yeah, you can see here that like when we did eventually top, or even the first time we topped, it comes down, it does bounce in that demand, but then it wicks down heavily and bounces in this demand. So again, I need to think it through, but my concern if we do reject here is, and in that 113 to 127 area, is that we're just going to run straight back through, if not down. So I've got a green cross on this 3 months, so that would kind of be the higher time frame where I'd be looking. But again, I don't know if this is the top yet, so I don't want to think too much about that until I know whether it's the top, or until I at least see something that's more certain. The 61.8 fib at the moment is in that 3 month and at this CME gap where I had the question mark from previously. So that's kind of interesting to note. On the linear scale, it's a little bit higher, and it's in fact exactly at that 3 month level. So again, from a confluence perspective, this is pretty decent. But we still need to see structure break. The only other thing was US dollar dominance. So as you know previously, like I've talked about, I had this black line. I didn't actually think it would come down quite as hard, but we had quite a corrective move up here, going up into supply for the second test. Obviously, it just whipped through that supply, had quite a corrective move, bear flag. So I kind of said, and I think one of my group had said, oh, this is looking bullish, like around here. And I said, well, yes, obviously for that day it was, but this is also looking very corrective. So I said, it was very possible that it would do this black line, which essentially is what happened. And the bottom was sort of arbitrary at that stage. This is now back in monthly demand. So this is, again, where I kind of wanted this to bounce, if it's going to bounce. And it's a tough one now. We're on the third hit. We never hit this level below that I actually wanted to hit. So I don't know if this is going to run through now and actually hit that level. But the whole thing is in a big 6 month demand. So what I've kind of figured out is the high time frames on Bitcoin or on crypto in general are kind of a bit challenging, because sometimes you'll get that reaction straight off the level, and other times it will drift much deeper inside. And when you're talking monthly or 6 month supply and things, they're huge zones. Either way, what I was at least looking for was confluence. So I did put in the chat the other day, not in the chat, in the main Telegram channel, that this had hit the monthly level there, where I'd originally said, and I was kind of hoping we'd get some sort of bounce for a retest. Still hoping for that. We're just obviously going deeper now. But, excuse me. But yeah, looking at just some of the other things for confluence, USDC, one of my group charted the other day, so I thought I'd have a look at that as well. So this is coming into its hit 2 month demand. There's a daily here, there's a 3 month just below, but obviously the structure of this is quite different to the US dollar dominance chart, because this is much higher. I think this went much higher on this wave, whereas the tether dominance, yeah, so the tether dominance, you can see like this wave, as that from December to April this year, didn't take out that high, whereas on USDC it did. So this is December to April, so it took out the previous high. So it's quite a different structure. But again, just from a confluence perspective, I like to look at everything. So again, this is in an area it could bounce, but obviously it's a huge zone, and we're just at the top of it. It had a little bounce kind of close to the top of it there. So again, at what point, is this going to come all the way down here? But at least at the time I looked at it, I was still like, this could come deeper. I think I put this daily in after, but really I was looking at least for that 3 month. Similarly, the amalgamated chart where you add together Tether, USDC and DAI. Again, at the time I was looking at this, I wanted lower, and we're now close to on this, at least where I wanted it. But I think we were just kind of up here floating, and I had that green line as a kind of a maybe bounce level. But now obviously we're heading a bit deeper. So yeah, and that's similar to the US dollar tether chart in that it hasn't taken out the August high with the bounce. But yeah, I need to look at those things a bit more. But again, this is all stuff just to kind of give you a sense of whether you think we're topping or not, or whether I think we're topping. So total is obviously now broken out as well, and it's actually looking stronger because the majors have been super strong. This is now looking a lot stronger than Bitcoin. So that's interesting, but again, it's because of the majors and Ether. So Ether's just been crazy. So I'll get onto that in a minute, but I'll just look at these totals first. So total 2, I was looking for a retest of this area, which is what we're getting, but obviously we're running now quite high in the zone. And the difficulty with Ether as well, so as while I was bearish on Ether, probably 60-40 bearish on Ether based on the structure, because I go with the most recent and it's in 3 month supply. But I had said it could go significantly higher inside it. What we have had finally this week is that the ETFs, or this week and last week, the ETFs have really weighed in now. So after they got approved, I meant to look at when they got approved. I can't remember exactly, but at the start of this year or so, when you can look at the Ether chart and see where the pump was. Nobody bought that. It was very, very little buying, but the last couple of weeks, obviously, people have really been coming back in. So I was sort of saying, if you've got fundamentals that support, so it's pushed, obviously, the 3 month supply on Ether, which is kind of the equivalent to where we are in this now, is obviously then much weaker if we've suddenly got a huge amount of new demand that's going to push it all the way through. So obviously, I know people on Ether have very high expectations, and the total 2 chart tends to reflect that, and they're sort of thinking up here. And I guess we are still in an upward structure. That was always the thing. This has always come off the 2 month and the low. Ether itself ended up somewhere down here, but has now pushed significantly back up. But yeah, anyway, so it's in a zone of interest. So this, I guess the simple thing is like total's broken out. So it was Bitcoin, and is the breakout going to last? Total 2 is in supply, although obviously Ether's been strong, so it's pushed high. Total 3 basically the same. I didn't have a judgment on this because this had already tested the monthly, and it came back into the area that I wanted to look for longs, and it's now obviously significantly higher. But again, is this going to break out, or is this now you'll see on the others chart, but is this, an A, and then we've got an A, B, C, and then we're going to have a C wave, and the C wave, that's exaggerated, but the C wave could end up as a sort of triangle. It's now quite an aggressive triangle. So we could end up with a triangle and, bounce here and go up. Or it could be a zigzag, which then means we end up back down here. And this is my concern with alts and with alt season. So do be careful, because while everybody's being extremely bullish now is not the time to buy. Here was the time to buy. Here would be a bit better. Here will be a time to buy, maybe more aggressively up here if, once you see things come down, but obviously now is not the time to buy. But those are the 2 areas I'll look for potentially getting longs if this is really just being bullish for another breakout. But I am concerned that we're still in a sort of a retest. We never had a lot of the majors and the bigger coins didn't have, like, some of them hit the monthly supplies up here, but a lot of them didn't. And what I'm finding now is a lot of them are coming back for those zones. So I'm getting quite a few of those alerts going off in the last few days. Um, Others are similar. So others, when I did my last stream, I was kind of looking again, are we going to create a triangle here once we had this bounce? So we got the low there. And then are we going to create a triangle? And I was thinking at that point, it was more likely we'd have a triangle because a lot of the alts. So again, the challenge with the alts is that we had a higher low here, same on all the majors, but a lot of them made a monthly supply in here. So I was uncertain as to whether the monthly supply would play out and we would get a triangle with a bigger drop, take those off, but like per this red line that I had here, or whether the higher low was more important. And I guess with what the market's doing, the higher low has been more important, and we've ended up with this channel. So the green, I said the more bullish scenario was the green channel, and the very bullish scenario, which is basically what's happened, is that we held that level and we pushed straight up off it. But again, now this is finally coming into a zone of interest. But similarly, my concern, and this, like if you want to kind of like query this, I guess, like for me, this just looks very similar to that US dollar dominance chart. So again, here, when, arguably people could be very bullish, the context is obviously very different when you look to the left, but we came down, we had this bounce, and if people were trading this, they would want to be bullish, thinking this is going to go to the moon. But really, what we ended up with was kind of a bit of a corrective pattern. Okay, so this is a lower time frame than what we're looking at on others, but excuse me. But again, and it's, again, it's challenging because crypto also, it can take off when it wants to. And we certainly have seen that with a lot of alts. But again, are we, similar as I put to total, are we doing this sort of pattern? And then, then we need to see, is this just going to then fall off and now come back and do the red line? So that's the risk, is whether alt season is going to happen. And as you know, again, even from way back when, I was then anticipating that this would very possibly be a head and shoulders. So, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we consolidate through here and we go for another wave. But I need to think that through. But those are the risks. But the point is that, so while total's at all-time high and could go higher if obviously Bitcoin wants to go higher, total 2's at resistance, again, strong, could break through. Total 3, again, the second hit, also strong. But again, like I say, now is not the time to buy. Either wait for these to break out and then come in on alts later, or wait now and see if we get a bigger dip down into here, but then just be conscious of that pattern, this like channel that we've got going, and that this could be a larger bear flag for that move. So yeah, anyway, I think I've rammed that home sufficiently. 3:20. Total DeFi, again, in my circle of interest now. Could push higher, but again, that's still potential head and shoulders pattern. Total E100 is one of the more interesting ones. So this is a new market cap chart, so it's total excluding the top 100. So this is the smaller rule. So if we talk about the rotation, which goes from Bitcoin to Ether to the majors, large caps, and then finally to the small caps, you can argue this is potentially lagging. Again, the difficulty here for the exact same reason as I said with others, you can see I've got the dotted line there, is, is this, whoops, is this going to do that triangle that I talked about, or is this now going to catch up with everything else and get a run up here for the small caps? But I do think it's worth now looking at the small caps. Obviously, that's, me being bearish and again not wanting to buy supply. But it's certainly, from what I've seen on alts, so we're getting some rejections. Like the majors obviously have pushed a lot, but on the smaller caps are still trading both directions okay. Ones that are failing, so again, the ones I'm finding are failing are for the exact same reason as I said here, that we have a higher low. So looking for shorts in here is possible, again, if it wants to make a triangle or if it wants to even pull back for another move up. So some of the alts are doing that, but then a lot of the strong ones, because of the FOMO in the market now, are just running straight through. So yeah, so the small caps so far have actually been all right, because you can see this hasn't pushed as much. So the small caps have been trading both directions kind of nicely. And I think it's pretty hard to pick which ones are going to break out still. So maybe that's because I look at 700 of them. But Mm. Anyway, this is just something to watch out for because particularly now because we're coming into the weekend, so we might get some like smaller cap runs on alts over the weekend. Be careful because we are in supply. We could come down, just reject here. This is a monthly zone, don't forget, up here. Um, and yeah, so again, there's not much more to say on that. But it'd be nice if we get a run on the smaller alts over this weekend. BTC dominance finally has fallen off a cliff. It hit 6 months supply like ages ago back in February, and then it had another push and hit the 2 months inside it just before, and then another push and finally hit the 2 month. And this has now broken a monthly demand. So that is potentially, if this can play out, if this doesn't bounce here, then maybe we can see an alt season if this starts slowly moving back up and all the money flows into alts. But then with this monthly supply, we get the rejection later. But we've still got 2 weeks till the end of the month, so I don't want to preempt that. This is what will be monthly supply if it confirms, but at the moment it's not confirmed. And again, just be conscious. This has obviously dropped a lot now. It's not. Again, it's difficult because it's choppy. So there's a 2 month demand down there. There's a couple of weeklies in there, and it's now on a 5 day. So again, where it's exactly going to bounce, I don't know. Like maybe it'll just drop like a stone. But again, we are coming into some sort of support. So just be conscious of that when you're trading alts, and don't be too aggressive because this bounce is particularly hard, then it's possible alts can die. But again, this doesn't align well with the USDC. Well, I suppose, Bitcoin dominance can still bounce, and this is not likely to bounce. I don't know. I need to think that through a little bit because, again, the confluence isn't quite as I'd like it there. Getting a bit of a move down from Bitcoin now. So, but again, anyway, we just wait for structures to break. Obviously, we've had a decent run now. So from, when was that? Back in June, end of June to now. So the last 3 weeks, we've had this run down. So obviously Bitcoin dominance has come down really hard this week. So if this does bounce here or even consolidate here, then we could get a little bit more of a run on alts, and then maybe US dollar dominance is also in support. So it's a challenging one. Ether dominance and Ether itself. So obviously I was looking at this range, again, talked about that previously, consolidation there and then pushing up. I was initially just looking at that next weekly level because it hadn't quite hit the weekly here and there's a possibility of it just rejecting in that circle. But obviously Ether's just being insanely strong and runs straight through it. I don't really even want to judge where it can go up here because again, it's not clear. There's a monthly in there, there's weeklies below it, etc., etc. So I might have a think about that later and maybe draw a fib on it, something. But I was still even looking back at like July 2019. I was just kind of hoping that this would give a better retracement here before moving, similar to how we had back here, to what you see on the Ether BTC pair. But it's obviously now just taken off. So, but at some point, like I do think we should get some sort of like decent pullback like that. So again, be conscious of that and that can happen, even sort of now or potentially up here a little bit. So maybe like 12-ish%. But I need to kind of, like I say, I need to fib it. I need to kind of look at higher time frames, see if there's anything over here that could sort of act as a kind of SR level, like maybe here. So we need to have a little bit of think about that. So that's Ether dominance. Others dominance. Oh God, it's 3:30 already. So others dominance again, like I wanted lower on this. We had a weekly demand, and I did want it. I was like hoping that, I said in the last stream we were consolidating through here, and it was looking like it wanted to try and break out of this range. It wasn't looking bad for a bottom, but that I actually would have preferred this lower. So again, that's the risk now. Again, we've come back into this 3-week zone where I originally had that test from before. So again, is this now going to fall back down into there? So again, it's just a time to be a little bit wary of alts. So that would be others dominance. So I guess if others dominance drops, BTC dominance has already dropped. So I don't know, and then is the money just going to flow back into US dollar dominance, which is now at support? Total DeFi was the one I was always more bullish on. And in fact, I thought it was going to come down lower. I was more bullish when it hit this 2 week. Put that back up. It had this 2-week demand, and I was more bullish when it hit that, but then it rejected off the 2-weekly at the high here, and then came down a bit deeper, but didn't quite get to the 3-week level, which is kind of what I was hoping. But again, that's looking strong. So on these, a lot of these and a lot of the alt charts, what you need to be kind of watching for in the next 2 weeks is whether they're going to create this new monthly demand. So you can see that it's pushed up, and if it closes and flips that, it was a sort of a very weak monthly supply. But it might create a new monthly demand. Obviously, it's already got a weekly demand there. That one can be deleted. So yeah, obviously total DeFi is kind of being reasonably strong at the moment, but again, back up second test of supply. So I do expect it to push a little bit higher, or it might be it has already pushed a little bit higher. But again, the chop makes it more challenging here. And it's just a question if you're a believer in alt season, if you think this is now going to do this, playing out this giant broadening wedge, and we're now going to see a significant move up. Personally, I would at least rather see some, I want to see, some either a bigger push through here or some decent consolidation, a nice retest, and then up, if it's going to hold. And then finally, total E100 dominance again. So this now, like relative to the DeFi pair, 2-week level was up there, and it's come right down into the 3-week demand. But again, like it's still potentially early days, but the others and so others, so resistance DeFi did push through this consolidation from May. So again, if we do get that run on others, then maybe we're just going to get a push through here now. So again, be aware that that may be coming, but also be aware that we are still under resistance. So it's at a difficult time, and it's So we're at the time where we could see the smaller alts breaking out, and the market cap chart kind of supports that, if it's going to follow what everything else is doing. So I guess the big question is if we're going to follow out, and and that's been back to is this time the same as all the previous times? And everybody else says yes. And I guess if everybody believes that, then it probably is. But the difference from my perspective is that this for the previous times it was us buying all this stuff, whereas now it's the institutions. So do you think the institutions are going to come along and buy Farcoin? Well, Farcoin they might, because that's a big market cap, but I mean, I don't know. I think that would just be embarrassing for an institution. But are they going to come along and buy all these small shit coins? Okay, 3:30. So I won't go through the majors now. I actually might, I'll come back from my appointment and maybe try and do another brief, or maybe do a stream, but maybe do another brief video then about alts, and then I'll go through all the majors. Yeah, like I say, like all my alerts are coming through. I've still got heaps and heaps of them. You can see, we're sort of hitting levels and getting reactions, but I just haven't had the time, unfortunately, this week to kind of think through all the structures. But maybe I can show you one. I can show you Zen, because that's again the pros and cons and the challenges. So again, we're obviously still holding Zen is still holding this range low here, having had multiple hits on it from when's that, from 2023 until now. Finally had this big bounce, but then and so the problem with a lot of alts is that we were looking for longs in this area. They had made a decent move at the end of last year, and we were looking for the higher lows, but so many of them plowed straight through demand, and as a result, so many of them now have significant supply above. And in the case of Zen, this doesn't appear to have a monthly above, but a lot have. And in fact, this is only wick through that monthly demand there, but a lot of these alts had a monthly demand here, and they've just run straight through it, which is why they're now going back to test. Some of the alts also have 6 months supply. So like Link, for example, has 6 months supply. Anyway, so things like this. So we're seeing that bounce yet again on this low. A lot of these have also broken down, but it's come back up into a monthly supply. It's a weak monthly supply because it has made a higher low. But you can see that green candle there is making that large monthly supply. But we have the higher low. So it's that, it's that structure that, are we going to make a higher low and then a higher high? Or, is this going to hold for another big run like that? Is this going to end up all the way up there? And I really don't know at this point. So like I say, I'm still so on most alts, the short version is most alts have got down here a weekly demand, most of them got a weekly, and some of them have a 3-week. So let's just see if this has got a 3-week. No, this doesn't have a 3-week because it's a bit of a lagger. But most of them have a weekly demand here. If not, they've got 4 or 5 day, 3-day, or something like that, depending on what structures they had. Like some of the smaller alts, I think, have lower time frames, and most of the majors have this weekly. So we need to see, it's going to reject here, maybe it'll reject here, and then it's going to come and retest. If it makes a lower high here and comes and retests, this is not strong demand. So then we may see that bigger drop, like I said on the others chart. Oops, let's do that. We may see that bigger drop, like I said on the others chart. Or if this moves up first and then comes back to test, then that will be stronger. So that's another option. Or it's just going to come back and test and just move because, again, like some of these over here wouldn't have been strong demands at the time, but it's only when they move. And the other problem and challenge is, maybe it's not going to come back. This apparently is a monthly level, but this, I would have been waiting for a re-entry on that weekly demand, which never got tested. But again, in my opinion, don't FOMO those things because there will be things that do test. So maybe you're going to get some things that are just going to run without you and they're not going to test, but there will be enough that do retest, that do that. And I can show you AOT as a final quick example. So this, for example, AOT was one of the ones on the layout that I was watching, talked about in previous streams, that I had longs off the lows and then get too aggressive here. Really, really nice re-entry to get that run up. And then I had an aggressive long entry up here, which then failed dismally, and then it just did that falling off a cliff, but it didn't fall off a cliff quite like Seraph and AGX and BMT, the three that kind of just made me crazy the week before last. But it came back down to this 3-day demand and has just run straight again. Again, the timing of the market helps with that. And obviously everything's running, but that was a really strong move off this 3-day demand that it made. So that's kind of, you will get stuff like this, and you will get stuff, similar chart, but like this, and you're just going to go, oh shit, I missed it because you were waiting for here or whatever. And then you'll get things like this, and that's why I say don't, and I'm not great at these FOMO entries. Like I can see with hindsight, this wasn't, it hadn't made a higher high, hadn't taken out that wick, so it was risky. Timing was off, if Bitcoin's not in the right place. So some of these work, some of them don't. You can see it coming up here. We've made dailies and continually bounced off the dailies, and then this one it decided not to. But yeah, anyway, so that's those are all the challenges. And then back to Zen. So it's basically the same thing. So it's that higher low. Are we going to make a higher high here? And on the majors, we're now seeing, obviously most of the majors are making higher highs. Actually, didn't talk about Ether at all, did I? Have we got? I really need to leave in like 5 minutes. So quickly, finally on Ether. But to be honest, there's not a great deal to say. So Ether BTC looks very like the Ether dominance chart. And as I said, it's exactly the same. There's a whole load of chop up here, and it's hard to judge now in the next 5-day supply, having run straight through this weekly. Might close the weekly on a giant swing failure. I have to see. New weekly demand, trend line stops below. That's the other thing I haven't talked about, I guess, and I need to talk about more on the majors. You just be conscious that a lot of the alts have left these trend line stops down here. So again, that's my concern. Like when we look at Zen, for example, you see if I can have this has this. Like this is not particularly a strong move. So yeah, some of these have ended up in a lot more green, but my concern is that that if we're now going to reject, they really have got ammo. Oops. They really have got ammo just to run straight back through and test lower zones. Particularly in the case of something like this, which is obviously a lower high. This then makes that not a very high probability long entry. But yeah, I've alerted a bunch of them anyway, so we'll just have to see what happens when they hit. But those are my concerns anyway about that. So yeah, quickly back to ETH. So yeah, Ether BTC is just running through, obviously Ether itself. So I had a whole bunch of entries. This was my kind of potentially aggressive entry just for this 2-month supply. And really, obviously, it had far too much consolidation when it got there before, with hindsight. But with the overall 3-month supply, I still want to be kind of keeping an eye on the zones that might give shorts. Similarly, I had, I think, alerts here on a 3-day and for this 3-week, and I had again said that we could run higher because we had so much chop through here. But again, worth watching. And I think, kind of each of them low time frame. This did give some consolidation and then flipped to daily demand, so it did get quite a nice easy entry there. Whole bunch of CME gaps below again, and has now come up to my neck. So this was an old 5-day, but also a daily supply literally at the top of this drop. But again, these are basically guessing now. Once it's gone so high into the zone like this, then it's hard to know what it's going to do or whether it's just going to continue to run, consolidate for a couple of minutes. Couple of days. The only other thing on Ether, actually, that I should just highlight right before we end, BTC, where's my pixels? that when I did, again, reflecting on, are we going to run through this zone, so you can see here, there's that, clear 3-month supply. It had a test on it and that very brief consolidation and then went up. And again, so I was looking back here and it was actually very similar. So we had, a 3-month supply there. This brown zone. But the difference there is that this wick, this has obviously dropped a lot more. So this is a much stronger 3-month than this. But this, when it did come back through properly to the 3-month, again, it had only a very brief consolidation before running through. But the difference being is that this did obviously test very close to it previously, which we don't have here. So it's probably not really a fair comparison as such. However, it does really show that, when it got to this 3-month level, so again, you can see the brown there, just, it literally consolidated for, this is a 3-week chart, so it was, a couple of months, it was a period of time, but then just went green straight through it. So there is obviously, this is kind of done the same, like while I wanted a bigger drop off that level, it doesn't have to be given, so it did react off the 3 months, but then has now made a 3-week demand, and again, just a couple of months of consolidation, and it's pushed up through it. So there is obviously the possibility we're now here, and this is just going to keep running. So again, just be aware of that. If the market is very bullish, if the ETF is going to keep buying. The only other final words. I haven't looked at much of the data other than the ETF data. Like I said, that shows that there's just been a whole load of buying going on, and BlackRock's been heavily into buying. I thought we might have had some selling yesterday from ARK, but it hasn't come up. So yeah, BlackRock's continually buying on that's Bitcoin, and on Ether the same. Again, they're ramping up their buying and ramped it up heavily. As 2 days ago, I should refresh this, I don't think. Yeah, and yesterday and the day before was ramped up very heavily on BlackRock. Doesn't mean anything. BlackRock did buy the top on Bitcoin, like a couple of the interim tops that we've had. They have very long time frames, so don't necessarily. I think the price could still half. And I think it did go down 50% on Bitcoin when they all bought the top end from that previous long consolidation. Was it last year or earlier this year? Yeah, so I haven't looked at any of the detailed data. From all the data has been saying, all the CVDs saying the Bitcoin isn't a buy. So I guess there just must be a lot of OTC going on that isn't accounted for in the data that I have, and there was some a lot of short squeezing going on as well. But it did seem to be very much driven by, firstly, derivatives, and secondly, the ETFs, and all the spot buying on the traditional exchanges, centralized exchanges, just isn't there. But again, I can have a look at that again later. Yeah, so maybe I'll do part 2 after my appointment, but I have to run now, so I hope that's helpful. Feel free to put any questions in the comments or in chat, and then I can answer them if I do part 2 in a couple of hours. So yeah, have a good afternoon.